Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, checking your bank account, and discovering that while you were sleeping, your money had been working hard all night. Sounds great, right? There's just one problem. It wasn't working for you, it was working for the bank. Every year, millions of Americans deposit their paychecks into savings accounts, believing their money is sitting safely in a vault, waiting patiently until they need it. It feels logical after all. That's what banks do, right? But what if I told you that's not really how modern banking works? What if I told you that the moment your paycheck hits your account, that money becomes one of the most valuable assets the bank owns? And what if I told you that while many Americans earn almost nothing on their savings, banks can use those same deposits to generate billions of dollars in profit? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a system that affects almost every American household. Because once you understand how banks actually make money, you'll never look at your savings account the same way again. For most people, a bank feels like a giant financial piggy bank. You work hard, you get paid, you deposit money, and the bank stores it safely. Simple. At least, that's what many people assume. In reality, banks are not giant storage facilities. They're businesses, and like every business, they exist for one reason: to generate profit. Now, before anyone gets angry, let's be clear. Banks are not secretly breaking the law. They're not hiding bags of cash underground. They're not stealing deposits. What they're doing is something much more interesting. They're taking the money deposited by millions of ordinary Americans and putting it to work across the economy. Think about it. Imagine every person in your city decided to keep their cash under their mattress. No mortgages, no car loans, no business loans, no financing. The modern economy would slow down dramatically. Banks solve that problem by moving money from people who have it today to people who need it today. And for the most part, it works. The problem isn't that banks make money. The problem is that most people never stop to ask just how much money they make. Let's say you deposit $1,000 into a savings account. What do you imagine happens next? Most people picture that exact $1,000 sitting in a digital box with their name attached to it. But that's not how modern banking operates. Instead, your deposit becomes part of a massive pool of money. A pool that can be used to support mortgages, business loans, personal loans, credit lines, and countless other financial products. In other words, your money doesn't simply sit still. It moves. And movement is where profit is created. Now, at first glance, this doesn't sound bad. In fact, it sounds reasonable. After all, if banks couldn't use deposits, there would be little reason for them to exist. But here's where things start to get interesting. Many Americans spend decades doing exactly what they were told to do: work hard, save money, be responsible, build a nest egg. Yet, despite doing everything right, they often discover that their savings barely grow. Meanwhile, the financial institutions holding those savings continue reporting enormous profits year after year. That contrast creates a question more people should probably ask. Why does it feel like the bank is getting richer from my money than I am? The answer isn't simple, but understanding it begins with understanding one uncomfortable truth. Your savings account was never designed to make you wealthy. Read that again. Your savings account was never designed to make you wealthy. Its primary purpose is safety, convenience, liquidity. A place to store money you may need soon. Emergency funds, monthly expenses, short-term goals. That's what savings accounts do best. But many Americans unknowingly expect them to do something they were never built to do: create meaningful long-term wealth. And that misunderstanding has cost people more money than they realize. Because while your money sits in a low-yield account, earning very little, inflation quietly works in the background. Prices rise, groceries cost more, rent increases, insurance premiums climb, medical expenses grow. The purchasing power of your money slowly shrinks. And most people never notice it happening. Not because they're irresponsible, not because they're lazy, but because nobody ever explained how the system actually works. Most schools don't teach it. Most families don't discuss it. Most people simply inherit financial habits without ever questioning them. Which brings us to the most important question in this entire video. If banks are using deposits to generate profit, and if savings accounts aren't designed to build significant wealth, then what should ordinary Americans actually do? The answer may surprise you. But before we get there, we need to understand something even more important. Exactly how banks turn deposits into billions of dollars in revenue every single year. To understand how banks make so much money, let's follow a single dollar. Imagine your paycheck lands in your account on Friday morning. You buy groceries, pay a few bills, maybe transfer some money into savings. The rest stays in your account. From your perspective, nothing unusual has happened. But from the bank's perspective, something extremely valuable just arrived. Deposits. And deposits are the fuel that powers the banking business. Think about it this way. If you wanted to start a business tomorrow, you'd need capital. If you wanted to buy a rental property, you'd need capital. If you wanted to launch a tech company, you'd need capital. Banks are no different. The difference is that banks collect capital from millions of ordinary people simultaneously. Every paycheck, every direct deposit, every savings account, every checking account. Together, these deposits create enormous pools of money. Pools so large that many people struggle to comprehend their scale. Now here's where things get interesting. Banks don't earn significant profits simply because your money exists. They earn profits because they transform deposits into financial products. Mortgages, auto loans, business loans, lines of credit, credit cards, and each of those products generates income. Imagine two neighbors. One deposits $10,000 into a savings account. The other wants to buy a home. The bank sits in the middle connecting both sides. The depositor gets safety and convenience. The borrower gets access to money they don't currently have. And the bank earns revenue for making the connection possible. This is where the business model begins. Now let's talk about something most people never pay attention to: the spread. The spread is one of the most important concepts in banking, and yet most Americans have never heard of it. Imagine a bank pays someone 0.5% on a savings account. At the same time, that bank might issue loans at significantly higher rates. The difference between what the bank earns and what the bank pays is where a large portion of the profit comes from. That difference may sound small, but when you're dealing with billions of dollars, small percentages become enormous amounts of money. This is why banks are obsessed with deposits, because deposits are valuable. Very valuable. The more deposits a bank gathers, the more resources it has available to support lending and other financial activities. And that's one reason banks spend so much money convincing people to open accounts. Think about the advertisements you've seen. Cash bonuses, free checking, sign-up rewards, special offers. The goal isn't generosity. The goal is deposits, because deposits are the raw material of the banking industry. Now, some people hear this and immediately become suspicious. They think, wait a minute, if banks are using my money, is my money even safe? That's an important question. And thankfully, modern banking systems include safeguards designed to protect depositors. But that's not the part most people find surprising. The surprising part is realizing how dramatically different the reality is from the story many of us grew up believing. Most people picture banks as giant vaults. In reality, banks are more like giant financial engines. Money comes in, money goes out. Loans are issued, payments are collected, interest is earned, new deposits arrive, and the cycle repeats endlessly. Day after day, year after year, the machine never stops. And over time, that machine becomes incredibly profitable. So what should you take away from all of this? Banks don't become profitable because they store money. They become profitable because they put money to work. And that's the real lesson. Your savings account is important for safety, emergencies, and short-term goals. But building wealth requires understanding how money grows over time. Banks aren't the villains of this story. They're simply playing their game extremely well. The question is whether you're learning to play yours. Because once you understand how money actually works, you stop looking at your bank account the same way. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Wealth Blueprint for more videos that break down the hidden systems behind money, wealth, and everyday life in America. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.